A black hotel maid answered a call in Dutch in front of a millionaire. The next day, he sent for her. Zoe's cell phone rang as she cleaned the floor of the luxurious lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. Normally, she would never answer during working hours, rule number 1 from Manager Richards, especially for cleaning staff. But she recognized the number. It was the university. After 6 unsuccessful attempts to get a scholarship for her master's program in linguistics, this call could change everything. "One moment," she whispered to herself, hiding behind an ornate marble column. That's when her life changed in seconds. "Zoe Johnson," she answered discreetly, hoping not to be noticed by the guests passing through the lobby. The voice on the other end spoke in perfect Dutch. It was Professor Van Houten from the University of Amsterdam. Zoe responded immediately in the same language, her impeccable pronunciation flowing naturally as they discussed details of her application for the international program. "Mijn motivatiebrief was te laat. Onmogelijk. Ik heb het 2 weken geleden verzonden," Zoe explained, concerned that her letter of motivation had supposedly not arrived on time. That was when she noticed the sudden silence around her. She looked up and saw Richard Coleman, the billionaire owner of the hotel chain, standing a few feet away, watching her with an undisguised look of surprise. Next to him was Manager Richards, her eyes wide with fury. Zoe swallowed hard. "I have to go. Ik bel je later terug," she said hurriedly in Dutch, hanging up the phone. "Johnson. In my office now." The manager's voice cut through the air. The walk to the small administrative office in the basement seemed endless. Zoe felt the stares of her colleagues, some pitying, others barely concealing their satisfaction. At 29, she was the only black woman in the cleaning department with a college degree, something that Manager Richards made a point of constantly forgetting. "You know the rules, Johnson. No phones during working hours, especially in common areas," Richards fired off as soon as she closed the door. "And talking in, what was that? French?" "Dutch," Zoe corrected instinctively, regretting it immediately. "I don't care if it was Martian. What I care about is that Mr. Coleman, the owner of this hotel, saw a cleaning lady ignoring her duties to talk on the phone in the lobby." The injustice burned like acid. The white receptionists took personal calls regularly with no consequences. But Zoe knew what was going on. It was the same pattern as always. "I'm assigning you to the convention center bathrooms for the next 3 months. Maybe there you can practice as many languages as you want without embarrassing the hotel." Zoe felt her stomach sink. The convention center meant double cleaning shifts after corporate events, with no overtime. It was Richard's classic punishment for those who crossed the line. "You can go. And be thankful you're not being fired." That night was one of the longest. In her small apartment shared with 2 fellow nurses, Zoe cried silently, staring at her linguistics degree and international certificates framed on the peeling wall. 6 years of cleaning hotel rooms while trying to save for a master's degree, while sending out resumes that never received a response after in-person interviews. The next morning, she arrived early, determined to show professionalism despite the injustice. That's when the phone at the front desk rang. "Zoe Johnson?" Called Jennifer, the head receptionist. "Human Resources wants you. Right away." The HR department was on the top floor, next to the executive offices, uncharted territory for cleaning staff. In the elevator, she felt invisible as always, surrounded by executives discussing million-dollar mergers without even noticing her. "Johnson." Called the HR director as soon as she entered. "Please have a seat." Zoe sat stiffly, preparing for the worst. "Termination, most likely. Mr. Coleman has requested a meeting with you. Now." The owner's office was bigger than her entire apartment. Richard Coleman, at 45, was famous in the business world for turning bankrupt hotels into luxury properties. And now he was looking directly at her. "Dutch, French, Italian, and Mandarin, correct?" he asked bluntly, consulting an open folder on the desk. Zoe blinked, confused. "How did you?" "Your resume. I asked HR for it as soon as I heard you yesterday. Honors degree in linguistics from Georgetown, fluent in 6 languages, 2 of them Asian. And cleaning my hotel for 6 years." What Zoe didn't know was that this moment was no coincidence. What no one in that hotel suspected was that behind that phone call in Dutch was a much bigger story, an unlikely connection that would not only transform Zoe's life, but expose a system of discrimination that for years had kept extraordinary talent hidden behind brooms and cleaning products. If this story of prejudice in the workplace stirs your indignation, sign up to find out how a simple phone call in a foreign language would become the catalyst for a turnaround that not even the most powerful billionaire could have predicted. For a few seconds, the office was completely silent. Zoe stood still, her mind processing what she had just heard. Richard Coleman knew who she was, really knew her, and not just as the invisible woman in a cleaning uniform that everyone ignored in the hallways. 6 years, Coleman repeated, closing the file and crossing his arms. May I ask why a Georgetown-educated linguist is cleaning my bathrooms instead of working on international translations? Zoe took a deep breath. I sent 47 resumes to the International Relations Department of this hotel. All ignored. I tried for an internal transfer 12 times. Always denied. By whom? Manager Richards and Mr. Whitmore, Director of Operations. Coleman wrote down the names without batting an eyelid. Curious. Whitmore constantly complains about the lack of multilingual staff for our international clients. His eyes narrowed. Especially for Asian conferences. What Coleman didn't say was that he had noticed a disturbing pattern. 3 months earlier, he had hired a consulting firm to discreetly investigate why his East Coast hotels had alarming turnover rates among qualified non-white employees. Zoe, I'll be blunt. Tomorrow a trade conference with Dutch and Chinese business executives begins. I need someone who speaks both languages fluently and understands cultural nuances. And you want me to clean their rooms? Zoe asked, unable to hide her sarcasm. Coleman smiled briefly. I want you to be our international relations coordinator for the event. Temporarily. Salary $5,000 a week, starting today. Zoe almost dropped her purse. It was more than she earned in 3 months. Why me? There are hundreds of qualified candidates. Because I heard you speaking Dutch like a native. Because you have the qualifications I need. And because I suspect there's something very wrong going on in my company. An hour later, Zoe stepped into the elevator with a new badge and full access to the hotel systems. On her way to HR to finalize the paperwork, she ran into Manager Richards. The shock on the woman's face was priceless. Johnson? What are you doing on this floor without a uniform? Working, Ms. Richards. International Relations Coordinator, at the direct request of Mr. Coleman. Richards visibly paled. Impossible. You don't have the qualifications to. Georgetown, fluent in 6 languages, including Mandarin and Dutch, Zoe interrupted, maintaining a professional tone. My resume has been in the hotel's files for 6 years, along with my 12 transfer requests. As the manager stammered out explanations, Zoe continued on her way. In the HR department, she found an unexpected ally, Zoe Williams, a newly hired recruitment analyst who showed genuine enthusiasm. Zoe? Finally. I saw your file when I started 3 months ago and couldn't understand why someone with your qualifications was in housekeeping, Zoe confided as she arranged her transfer. I tried to talk to Whitmore, but he cut me off immediately. That afternoon, as she prepared for the conference in the VIP room, Zoe noticed something disturbing. The event documents contained incorrect and inappropriate translations in Mandarin, which could cause serious diplomatic misunderstandings with the Chinese executives. She quickly corrected the errors, redesigning the welcome materials. How did you know they were wrong? Asked Coleman, who had been silently observing her work from the doorway. The previous translation used terms that could be considered offensive in formal corporate Chinese, Zoe explained. Whoever did this knows the basics of the language, but not the cultural nuances. Coleman nodded thoughtfully. Whitmore assured me he hired the best translators. It cost a fortune. He hired someone without checking their credentials, Zoe corrected, pointing out a critical error in the translation of a partnership proposal. The next day, the conference began. Zoe glided among the international business executives with natural elegance, switching effortlessly between Dutch and Mandarin, mediating conversations and facilitating connections that would normally take days to establish. During a break, she was approached by Whitmore, the director of operations, a man who had never deigned to speak to her in 6 years. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Miss Johnson, I'm impressed. Richards clearly misjudged your potential. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. It's impressive how my resume listing fluency in Mandarin was overlooked, especially when the hotel spent $50,000 on inadequate translation services for this conference. Whitmore's smile froze. There must be some misunderstanding. I received confirmation of receipt of every email over the last 6 years, Zoe interrupted calmly, including those alerting you to critical errors in the translations contracted for Asian events. What Zoe didn't mention was that Zoe had given her access to the translation contract records. The company belonged to Whitmore's niece, who had no proven experience in formal Mandarin but charged expert rates. Worse, all previous translations contained similar errors that could have cost millions in lost business. On the third day of the conference, something unexpected happened. One of the Dutch businessmen recognized Zoe. "Wait, aren't you the student who wrote that brilliant article on linguistic variation in international business? Published in the Journal of Applied Linguistics." Zoe confirmed, surprised to be recognized. "I've cited your work at 2 conferences." The man exclaimed, calling colleagues over to meet her. Coleman watched from afar, noticing how Whitmore seemed increasingly uncomfortable. What the director didn't realize was that while he smiled and talked, Zoe was weaving a web that would reveal not just isolated mistakes, but an entire system of institutionalized discrimination and corruption that had kept talents like her suppressed while inflated contracts were directed to unqualified people. What no one at the Grand Plaza Hotel realized was that the black cleaning lady who answered a call in Dutch wasn't there by accident. Behind that seemingly simple department transfer, a plan was unfolding that would not only change Zoe's life, but expose a system of discrimination that affected dozens of employees. The question was no longer whether she could prove what had happened, but how devastating the truth would be when it came to light. On the morning of the 4th day of the conference, the Grand Plaza Hotel was buzzing with energy. Zoe's initiative had generated preliminary contracts that exceeded all expectations. As she walked through the lobby, she noticed something disturbing. Whitmore was leading a young woman, clearly nervous, to the executive elevators. "Miss Whitmore, your Mandarin translation is adequate," he said in a controlled tone. "There's no need for concern." Zoe recognized the last name immediately. The young woman was carrying a folder marked Final Translation, Master Contract. A quick glance as she passed confirmed her suspicions. The same critical errors from before persisted in the text. "Mr. Coleman needs to see this," Zoe thought, hurrying to the CEO's office. Coleman was reviewing documents when she entered unannounced. "Zoe? What's going on?" "Whitmore is replacing my correct translations with flawed versions done by her niece," Zoe explained, showing him screenshots on her phone. "And I have proof that this has been going on for years." Coleman stood up abruptly. "Are you absolutely sure?" "I have everything documented. What's more, I found records of inflated payments to her translation company, 3 times above market rate, while qualified candidates like me were systematically rejected." As they spoke, Zoe from HR rushed in. "Mr. Coleman, sorry to interrupt, but I found something you need to see right away," she said, handing him a folder. "Hiring records for the last 5 years. Consistent pattern of rejecting qualified non-white candidates, especially women." Coleman flipped through the documents, his face hardening with each page. The outside investigation had detected something, but this is systematic. At that moment, Whitmore entered the office without knocking, interrupting the conversation. "Richard, the Dutch are ready to sign, but they're asking about some inconsistencies in the translations. Johnson must have mixed something up." The silence that followed was icy. Coleman walked slowly to the door and closed it. "Thomas, I'm seeing payment records for $50,000 for incompetent translations, while we have qualified employees cleaning bathrooms," Coleman said, her voice dangerously calm. "Any explanation?" Whitmore paled visibly. "I don't know what you're talking about. We hire the best." "Her niece, Thomas?" Coleman interrupted. "With 0 experience in formal Mandarin? She has a certification." "Fake," Zoe finished, placing a printed email on the table. "I just confirmed with Peking University. They never certified Ashley Whitmore." Whitmore shot Zoe a look of pure hatred. "You're nobody. A cleaning lady who thinks she can play with the big boys." "PhD in Applied Linguistics from Georgetown," Zoe corrected calmly. "With 6 international publications. All in the HR files you've lost repeatedly." "Thomas," Coleman interjected. "I've called an emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. By then, I want her resignation letter on my desk." "You can't be serious," Whitmore laughed nervously. "Because of this. Choose your next words with extreme care," Coleman warned. 2 hours later, the executive auditorium was packed. All managers, supervisors, and directors had been summoned urgently. In the front row, Dutch and Chinese business executives waited curiously. Richards, the cleaning manager, looked confused, sitting next to other department managers. Coleman took the stage, Zoe at his side. "Today we discovered a systematic scheme of discrimination and nepotism that has cost this company millions," he announced gravely. "For years, managers such as Thomas Whitmore and Sarah Richards have implemented unofficial policies that have harmed not only our employees but also our bottom line." A presentation began behind him, showing comparative charts of employee qualifications versus positions, hiring and rejection statistics by race and gender, and overpriced contracts with companies linked to managers' family members. "Ms. Johnson, whom some of you knew only as a cleaning lady, saved our company from a diplomatic and financial disaster this week," Coleman continued, "by correcting translations that would have cost millions in contractual misunderstandings." The Asian businessmen nodded in recognition, some applauding quietly. "As a result of this investigation, Thomas Whitmore has been terminated for cause," Coleman announced. "Sarah Richards is suspended while we complete our investigation into her involvement. And effective immediately, we are implementing a complete audit of all hiring and promotions over the past 5 years." The room fell into shocked silence. Richards, now pale, stared at the floor. "And finally," Coleman smiled slightly, "I am pleased to announce that Dr. Zoe Johnson is being named our new Global Director of Internal Communications, overseeing all of our multilingual operations." The auditorium erupted in applause, some hesitant, many enthusiastic, especially from the cleaning crew sitting in the back, who applauded with tears in their eyes. As she left the stage, Zoe noticed Whitmore being escorted out of the building by security guards, his face contorted into a mask of impotent rage. As he passed Zoe, he muttered, "You won't last a month." Zoe just smiled serenely. In the pocket of her newly acquired blazer was a recording device, the same one that had captured every threat and racist comment Whitmore had whispered over the past few days as he desperately tried to cover up his scheme. That night, in her new office overlooking the city, Zoe finally allowed herself to cry. They weren't tears of sadness, but of deep catharsis. 6 years of cleaning hallways while her potential was denied. 6 years of your resume must have gotten lost, and maybe you're not a good cultural fit. She picked up the phone and called her mother, who had sacrificed everything to pay for her education. "I did it, Mom," she said simply, her voice breaking. What no one at the Grand Plaza Hotel could have predicted that day was that the real transformation was just beginning. While some executives were still digesting the shock of seeing old privileges crumble, others were already realizing the inevitable truth. True talent, when finally unleashed, not only corrects past injustices, but completely redefines the future. The fall of Whitmore and his discriminatory scheme was only the first chapter in a complete overhaul that would shake the foundations not only of that hotel, but of the entire American hotel industry. And it all started with a simple phone call in Dutch. 6 months had passed since that fateful day when Zoe answered a call in Dutch in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. What had once been an isolated case of personal justice had turned into a silent revolution in the American hotel industry. Zoe's office on the 32nd floor now overlooked all of Manhattan. A discreet plaque on the oak door read, "Dr. Zoe Johnson, Vice President of Diversity and International Relations." The salary was 5 figures, monthly, not annual. But the real power lay beyond the title or financial compensation. "Restructuring committee assembled and waiting, Dr. Johnson," announced Zoe, now her executive assistant and close friend. "All regional managers are on the conference call." Zoe nodded, taking a deep breath before entering the conference room where Richard Coleman and the board of directors were waiting for her. It was the day of the final presentation of the Invisible Talents program, a personal initiative Zoe had developed to identify and promote qualified employees who were systematically overlooked throughout the hotel chain. "The results of the pilot program have exceeded all of our expectations," Zoe began, presenting the numbers on the screen. "In just 6 months, we identified 147 employees with skills in languages, finance, management, and technology who were in roles well below their capabilities, 83% of them Black, Latino, or from other minority groups. Coleman nodded approvingly. The program had been his first demand when accepting the promotion, not just fixing his individual situation, but changing the entire system. Most impressive, Zoe continued, is the financial impact. Outsourced translation costs are down 78%, international customer satisfaction is up 42%, and our diversity ratings are now at the top of the industry. All this while providing real opportunities to people who are already on our payroll. Across the country, Sarah Richards watched the conference broadcast from a small hotel in California. After an extensive investigation, she had escaped termination by accepting a demotion and transfer. Now she managed the laundry at a second-rate property, a daily humiliation for someone who had once rejected talent based on prejudice. The next expansion of the program will include an internal mentoring system, Zoe explained. Each promoted talent commits to identifying and supporting other employees with potential. Thomas Whitmore was not attending the conference. After his dismissal, no luxury hotel would hire him. Allegations of systematic discrimination and embezzlement had permanently tarnished his name in the industry. Rumor had it that he was now working as a night manager at a roadside motel in Arizona. His niece Ashley had had to return all her inflated payments, complete a professional ethics program, and was now studying Mandarin, ironically, with a scholarship created by the Coleman Foundation for Inclusive Language Education. In closing, Zoe said, turning directly to the camera that broadcast to all properties in the chain, I want to share something personal. She paused, letting the silence fill the room. When I was little, my mother worked as a maid in a hotel like this one. She had a college degree, but she never got a job in her field. She always told me, Zoe, no matter how much they try to make you feel invisible, your worth is not dependent on their recognition. Zoe took a deep breath, maintaining her composure. My mother passed away believing that some doors would never open for people like us. She never lived to see this moment. To see that her sacrifice was worth it. Across the room, several executives, many newly promoted through the program, wiped away tears discreetly. The true power of a company isn't how much it makes, but the potential it unleashes. For decades, the hospitality industry, like so many others, buried extraordinary talent under service uniforms, assuming that people of certain colors, accents, or backgrounds were only fit for invisible roles. Coleman stood up, applauding, followed by the entire room and hundreds of employees watching remotely. Later that day, Zoe received an envelope in her office. Inside was a postcard from Amsterdam and a letter from a University of Applied Linguistics offering her a position as a visiting professor. Professor Van Houten, who had made that fateful call in Dutch 6 months earlier, had followed her meteoric rise. Ironically, Zoe thought as she looked out the window at the city, I have Richards to thank for punishing me that day. If she had simply given me a warning, I might still be cleaning the same rooms, my degree gathering dust. The next day, Zoe officially launched a scholarship fund for hotel employees and their children, financed in part by her new salary. The first beneficiary, the daughter of her former cleaning colleague, who dreamed of studying hotel management. What began as a phone call in Dutch had sent ripples that now spread far beyond that hotel, far beyond that industry. The message was clear: talent exists everywhere. What is lacking are opportunities and recognition. True justice is not just punishing those who discriminate, but rebuilding entire systems so that prejudice has nowhere to hide. Zoe's sweetest revenge was not seeing her antagonists fall, but watching hundreds of people like her finally rise. If this story moved you and made you reflect on how silent prejudice can stifle extraordinary talent, leave your comment and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories about people who have turned injustice into platforms for real change. After all, the greatest lesson Zoe teaches us is that true greatness isn't about overcoming barriers alone, but about ensuring that doors remain open for everyone who comes after you.